Oh, you're from the West Coast. Oh, okay.
It's 8 a.m. here.
I guess that explains the PST on the schedule.
Yeah, it does.
You,
Pretty
you
much.
draw the you drew the short end to the panel with us.
I wouldn't call it the short end. Maybe the slightly longer, maybe medium end.
All right. And next thing on the calendar is just Cards Against Humanity. So, although I assume a lot of people will show up for that.
Cards Against
Enter
Humanity will
Door
always
by
be more
7:20.
popular than us, Bram.
I'm aware it's yeah, and on a Saturday as well. Saturday's supposed to be a good day.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. I probably should open the stream, see if there's questions there.
Yeah, I'll have it
Oh,
open.
it is audio only. It says on the stream. So.
Oh yeah, but if there are like questions in the
True.
in the comments, whatever. I just gotta find the link. I'm pretty bad at this stuff. Twitch.tv/MCBuildCon. All right. Cool. Should we just start, I guess?
Yeah, I guess you guys should give us a little introduction and tell us what you're going to be doing today.
All right. I'm Bramboss. I'm a managing director at Shapescape. And we'll be talking mainly about city recreations and how such projects can be used for multiple purposes. That can be academic, that can be educational, or that can be recreational, such as Marketplace. I'm 26, live in Belgium. That's pretty much it for me.
I am August Gade. I am Danish, also a director of Shapescape, where Bram is much more hands-on with our production. My main justification for being here is that I have a master's degree in urban design where I specialized in gamifying cities. So, for instance, making Minecraft recreations of cities. And then I've of course been involved with all the Shapescape city recreations as well.
All right. So first up, I think I'd like to start off with explaining how we go into production of city recreation. That starts off obviously by selecting the city, if it's for a client or for a specific project. That choice is of course made for us. We'll then look at the directionality of the plot of land that we need to make. So if we can, we'll always choose to make things on axis because pretty much all builders will know making things off axis is a pain. But yeah, after we've selected that, we'll make a image of the Google Maps area, import that on our server, start working on that. But we also have to take a look at scale. We've done projects which are like our Melbourne project, which were 1-to-1 scale, and we've also gone up to 2-to-1 scale for various other projects. Selecting this really changes the perspective of the player. For example, Florence was built in a 2-to-1 scale, and this made the player feel a lot smaller. In Melbourne, the player is has more of a grown-up perspective. Maybe August has some insight on that.
Yeah. So the interesting part about making city recreations is, of course, that the purpose, unlike many other Minecraft maps, is not just to look as good as possible within Minecraft. The whole essence, both when it's recreational, like when we release something on the marketplace, and when it's for clients, like what we did in Melbourne, is for people to be able to recognize places they've been or look at places in anticipation of going there and understanding them. And the beauty of navigationable virtual recreations, such as you can get in Minecraft, is that even though they are quite imprecise as what we get in naturally when we work one-to-one, as we did in Melbourne, being limited to the blocks of Minecraft means that we're quite off on many things, and many things will be larger than they're supposed to be in a one-to-one. But all of that doesn't really necessarily matter a lot. People will still understand the place better by navigating through the Minecraft world than they would having seen images. So that always makes it a difficult balance in should we scale it up to be more precise with the Minecraft blocks, but actually give people a less precise vision of how the area actually looks. And the final choice that we're making, that is, of course, it differs. So our marketplace maps will typically be a little more out of scale because they cater to a much larger audience, not necessarily people from these cities who can recognize them. Where something like the Melbourne project was specifically targeted at people who will be able to find their own street and can recognize that shop on the corner and such things.
For sure. Are there any questions so far, or should we just keep on?
So one new question for me here. I'm looking at the stream chat for questions. Where can other questions, where will they appear?
I'm assuming it's going to appear in event broadcast, or is that only for?
Yeah, so most of the questions will come through Twitch chat just because you guys aren't doing it in game. But as of right now, there are no definitive questions yet.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry.
That was a voice channel. Yeah.
I'll then log in game as well for questions.
So beyond that, we'll obviously also consider the size of a project. When a client like Melbourne comes to us with a specific area and with hard cutoff edges, that for us is probably going to be the easiest, because then we also have a list of areas that we need to focus on. They usually give us a list of high priority buildings. We also do this when we decide to do recreations ourselves for our marketplace products. We set high priority, medium priority, low priority areas. These high priority areas are always with the most fidelity as possible, whereas medium and low priority, of course, descend in fidelity and just need to capture the essence of an area. But of course, being recognizable is still a huge bonus.
Yeah, I think it's something, especially if you haven't done recreations before, I think something to realize about recreations that sort of comes, you may have heard, I think especially people who actually do forge paintings, do forgeries, they will say that requires much more skill than doing the. I don't know if that's true, but I think there is some merit to the case that it takes a lot longer than one would expect. Making if we were to make our own city and cityscape, which we've of course done many times, that is as a process a way faster task than recreating an existing city, just because of the amount of research and having to double check and making things fit. So you can't just make that house a little larger because that would make it easier to build. You have to work with the space that is given. And that is definitely something we see, and also that we have to work with when we select a new site for a city recreation, is that even expanding a few blocks means multiple hundreds of work hours sometimes. Yeah, so that's often our process when we go into what landmarks to include and such is often quite limited by the sheer amount of work it is to make a city recreation.
Limited by reality, sadly.
Yeah. Maybe we should go through just some of the different city recreations we've done, and we can sort of comment on how we feel the result ended up and some of the challenges with each of those projects.
Sure, we can definitely do that. I think the first ever city recreation that we've done is going to be Florence. It was a project that we've done really, really fast. It was done in about a month. But the obvious challenge there was, because we've never done it before, getting our entire production streamlined for it, where we wanted to achieve a high amount of accuracy in terms of facades and building height. And we definitely struggled with that in Florence, where we put a large emphasis on the primary locations. So that was the large cathedral and the Ponte Vecchio as well, and the city hall area. But other than that, I think most facades were done rather fast, but pretty much everything of that city was off axis, which made it a real slow process and a real painful process. But I think it still turned out well.
Yeah, it was as a first go. I think we succeeded quite well, and it was also quite well received. To give some context to the project, we were contacted by Marco Vigilini, who has been a part of a lot of Italian Minecraft edu project. To do this for the ultimate client was the Museo Associazione of Florence, the Museum Association for Florence. And the purpose was to give a version of Florence that children could go into and where children could express, so that people were allowed at some of these museums to make changes to the build. And the idea was that it was to give children a platform to express their wishes for the future of Florence. And it's one of those examples of Minecraft making an actual difference in real world politics, where these different suggestions by children would be submitted to the Council of Florence for evaluation. Whether anything ever came out of it, I'm unaware of, but even like the fact alone that children were given the opportunity to participate in a discussion that children normally can't says something about the power of the recreation and what can be done with it.
For sure. Like Florence set a theme for or a series of Italian city recreations that we've done together with Marco over, I think, a 2-year period, where we then also did Modena and Urbino, which is a very small town, and then I think we wrapped it off with a small recreation of a museum in Venice. I think there was also a Milan project somewhere in between there, but that wasn't a big one. I think we learned a lot during that phase when it came to recreations, especially about accuracy and speed. Because when you're working for clients, they always want it as fast as possible and as good as possible. And I think we definitely learned a lot during that process to streamline our process.
Yeah.
After like that phase of Italian recreations, I think we started our immersion projects, a lot of which are still currently ongoing. But I think the first recreation that we released on the marketplace was Trafalgar Square, which again was big learning phase because that style was completely different. But we stuck with the same scale as we learned on these Italian projects, a little bit closer to 2 to 1. And it was a lot of fun doing that. It's a very different style, and again, still a lot of off-axis, which makes it a little bit painful to do, but it's very rewarding, I think, if you see it come together.
And it was, as a project, it was interesting. It was our first release on the marketplace, and back then the marketplace was still so new that there was very little knowledge on what people like the clients actually wanted from the producers. And I think we made it sort of a side project to a much larger one, and it ended up being the opposite of what we expected. We expected it to just be a minor thing, and it worked out decently well with Trafalgar, and it was quite popular. And I think what we learned there, and a lot have learned since, is that realism and making just recreations, a lot of our immersions don't have a lot of gameplay. You can drive around and such, but just the fact that it resembles a place that someone might know or might have been, that on its own is quite enjoyable to the player. We had in the Trafalgar Square build, we had actually made sort of an exploration gameplay. It was very light, but it was still there, which quite quickly turned out to be not at all what people wanted. Like that was not why they got the map. They got the map to explore the square and see the Christmas tree and recognize things that they might have seen as tourists in the past, or it might be close to their home. And that's of course what we've been worked on since then. When we've kept doing immersions, is that just achieving something akin to realism and recognizable areas on their own is something that people just want to see, and they keep wanting to see different parts of the world.
For sure. I think after that we took a little break from city recreations to focus more on marketplace products. But after that, we started work on Chicago, which is still our most popular city recreation to date. Something we've done updates over in the past months to also add interiors, because up till now, all the recreations that we've done were without interior. And when it came to doing Chicago, we then realized people really want interior in these things. And after releasing Chicago, we then made the decision to start working on these interiors, updated it, and I think people really appreciated that. And it's also a returning feature in all immersion projects that we've done since, to add interior as much as possible.
Yeah, that's of course an additional challenge. So as Pram described in the beginning, the tools we use to achieve these layouts are scaled up, imported Google Maps, and then Google Street View, of course, plays a large part in getting all the facades right. When it comes to interior, that becomes much more of an issue, and of course some of the interiors will not resemble how they actually look, but then the challenge becomes to try and understand the area and what types of places these are,
I'd actually say
represent that in the buildings.
I'd actually say that pretty much none of the interiors represent what the building actually is inside, unless it is a really high priority building. Then we do make it a high priority and say, okay, we need to have this accurate, but generally we don't try to go for that. Also to give a little bit of creative freedom in that regard.
Yeah, and I think that's one of what some of you may recognize being builders yourself. A challenge with recreation builds is definitely that they can be. We do have people who have come to us because they really enjoy working on them, but there are also a lot of people who working too long on a recreation will. It's a bit draining because you don't get to express your own creative freedom nearly as much as you do on other builds. And that's something to, so as a team, and if any of you are working on multiple projects at a time, we have found that recreation builds are quite good side projects, because you can always, some of those where you're never in doubt about what should be done, you can always just go on Google Street View and find the next block and build that one. So you can always work on those, and it's maybe also good work if you're a bit exhausted creatively, but it's definitely valuable to have other kinds of work on the side as well, so you can sort of juggle in between them. Not that it takes any, I would argue it takes at least as much, if not sometimes even more skill with blocks to be able to represent these things, like actual things in real life, rather than just making something suited for Minecraft. But there is aspects in the building where it becomes a bit more mind-numbing, nonetheless.
For sure. So no questions, right?
I did actually get a question in between
Oh,
the last and this current one. Let me just find it real quick. Somebody asked, how long does a project normally take, and how do you stay motivated during the project as a team?
Generally, a project can vary wildly. Like I said, the project of Florence, that's probably our shortest recreation. That took a month. But we've worked on projects that have taken 9 months as well. Motivation in that is sometimes difficult, but I think taking breaks or switching projects in between can really help. But some of our builders, they don't need that, and they just keep going for months on end because that's what they enjoy doing. Um, if you enjoy recreations, then well, you don't want to break. You just want to keep going, and we definitely have a couple of those people. But most of our people do require like they'll be on the project for a month, and then they'll go to another project, and then they'll return afterwards. But because we have quite a few builders, we were able to do that and keep the project moving forward.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, and some of them. So I wouldn't go into specifics with all of them, but we have those of you who have been following our social media will know that we've teased a coming immersion. That's up until now the biggest one. It won't stay the biggest one, but the biggest one we've made, and that's just in terms of our counts, that's more than 1,000 hours put into that. That's it's of course spread across a long time and a lot of people. Still, it's a lot of man hours going into creating these projects, and they're easily. I've sometimes heard because they are for us too sort of a filler project in the sense that it's always good to have one going. It's something people can always jump on if they sort of grow tired of whatever people are working on. Mainly, but there's still every time we decide to do a new immersion, we're quite aware that it's gonna be the project we have running that will consume the most work hours. They always do. They run for a very long time, and they take a lot of active time.
Sure. For example, right now we have released 3 immersions, and that's Chicago, Vienna, and Amsterdam. Can also say that we've currently got 3 other immersions in the works, in various stages of works. One is pretty much finished; it's almost ready for release. The other one is still a few months out, and the other one, that's a very ambitious one, and we'll probably have to wait quite a while for that one. But it's we always have these projects ongoing that people can just jump onto, put in their hours, and then jump onto the next project.
Yeah, and it's always so as a songwriter, it's an interesting one because it's difficult to develop it much. So of course, what we did back when it became a possibility, we started adding cars and such to our immersions, and on the newest one we've just started. We are working with a different way of sort of putting the border on the area. We're doing that very differently than we ever have. So we are sort of trying to do new things, but of course the core essence of how these projects work is very much the same every time. Just different places in the world. And then there is a whole decision phase in trying to decide the next place to do, which of course naturally part of that motivation is to try and predict what will be more popular. But it's also we're trying to sort of split it out and do different kinds of settings with different architectural styles, just to not have someone build the same exact style for years and years on end.
Yeah.
There is actually a few more questions. I keep getting them as we keep going. I'm sorry, guys, but
no, that's good.
People
Perfect.
need to know. Let me just find it here real quick. It is How many builders, excuse me, how many builders work on a project, and how do you mesh people with different styles working on a single project?
How many people work on a project at a time? That can vary a lot. Again, I think the most we've had on a project is probably going to be around 25. And how do we mesh those? I think that's all going like super naturally in between them. Of course, we do have our managers who keep an eye on that. But meshing styles and stuff is something that flows very naturally. We don't really have to put too much emphasis on that. People are very good at figuring that out themselves and just getting on with it.
Yeah, so of course, as a team, that's one thing we value highly is the ability to adapt to styles because it allows us to be more efficient. But it has definitely, naturally, when you have multiple creative minds working on a project, there will always be, I wouldn't necessarily say conflicts, but there are differences in how things are done. I think the Immersion series specifically has the advantage that it allows a larger number of builders just because you are to a lesser degree expressing your own style and more so expressing a style that some architecture of the past have set for this particular house that you're building. And also, just by the nature of cities, when you have an imaginary city, often what happens in Minecraft, the way it's done a little bit utopian in a sense, even if it's a ruin or whatever, but all the buildings in the city will usually be of a similar style, which when you go out in the real world into any city in the world, that is by no means the case. Each house is very different, and sometimes you will find houses in the real world that really don't fit into the setting they're put in. But that is an advantage when you're recreating it, because if we have specific houses that look a bit odd in their setting, it could be that whoever built it did it in a different way than the other builders have, but just as likely and more often the case, it's just because that's how it is in reality. So we can sort of hide the differences between builders in that by just having each builder focus on their own blocks or their own houses.
For sure.
There are more questions, actually.
Great.
Let's see. Have you ever spoken to people that lived in the cities that you guys have recreated? For example, someone like the Chicago Immersion. Have you ever spoken to someone and have them react a certain way?
That was definitely the case on Melbourne. We did hear from people living in Melbourne saying that they recognize it and they found their house in the map, which was always funny. But we don't specifically go out and try to get into contact with them. But it's always great when people reach out to us and say that, oh yeah, this is like a neighborhood where I visited or whatever.
Yeah, we got told on Florence as well. We got feedback that the children enjoyed finding their own streets. We've also used it. We have a current edu client where we had pieces of an immersion that fit where they were situated, which was just a nice. It was a bit of a selling point for us that we could sort of show that and be like, "Oh, nice! They recognize that." That gave them a different understanding of how Minecraft builds could work. Then we have one project that is it's little known because it was not advertised nearly as much as other builds because it was a much smaller one. We did one for the Danish city of Aalborg in association with the university there, which was my university. So that was also for my master's thesis, which was specifically, that wasn't so much about Minecraft as it was about the ability to include citizens who may struggle understanding space and such without actually seeing it in the real world. And on that particular project, a lot of the work actually was to talk with citizens of Aalborg and hear them out on what it did to their understanding of the city. And the general feedback, the results of those tests were that people So what was showcased was actually something being built in Aalborg at the time, so something that didn't exist yet. So that was put into the context that they all knew, and the question was whether or not the people of Aalborg understood the plan for what was supposed to be built there better by seeing it in Minecraft than they would if they saw just like plans and drawings by the engineers and architects on the project. And the result was across the board that people understood it way better. Even elderly people who don't play Minecraft and have struggle understanding computer games in general, they still felt they understood that part of the city better after having seen it in Minecraft. Which to us have sort of confirmed that, of course, we would have kept doing it just for the recreational part of doing these, but it also confirms that there is an actual use of this, and it improves the understanding of cities for those who play the maps.
I do have another one here. Is there anything that you found that is surprisingly easy or something you didn't plan for when doing a recreation?
Surprisingly easy or something that we didn't plan for. Not really. Just gotta get on with it. Or something that we didn't plan for. I guess height limit is always going to be that thing, especially when you're doing American cities, because they do have a lot of high rises. Then you do sort of have to come at peace with that you can't go for full accuracy there. We as well had it in Melbourne, in the tallest building in the map there, where you're limited to 256 blocks, and sometimes that is not enough if you want to achieve accuracy. That's a shame, but we got to come to peace with that. It's just the way it is.
And then there is, and it's a minor thing, but there's sometimes, so an image of Google Street View can be a few years old, and of course, the larger metropolitan cities of the world, they grow really quickly. So often, the contents of maybe the image we have from Street View is a building site, and we'll have to make some decisions along the way on how do we represent this area now. Do we build what was there before, or is it still a building site in our version, or are we going to build the new thing and such? So sometimes it changes a bit. We specifically tried that on Melbourne, where we had a large area that we at first built in one way, but then the client actually informed us that area had changed, and we had to go back and make changes to it to represent the new reality.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely on Melbourne. This was a struggle because we were tasked to make new things which were getting built by the client. This was also the case with the Venice project, where we had to make a building that was not yet finished, but that the client wanted to present through Minecraft as well. That is a bit of a challenge if we don't have enough documentation of how the building looks.
Okay, so I actually have a question of my own. As someone who does environment and ambience and someone who specializes in it, how do you guys sort of trick people into thinking they're actually immersed, and what sort of things do you do to keep in mind that players will try and feel like they're in a build?
I think the easiest thing for that is just scale and size of the project. If people can't see the edge of the project, people will be more immersed. Something, for example, that we did wrong with the Chicago project is to block it off on all edges, and people could, except if they were on a phone, people could always see the edge, which broke immersion. Which is a pretty bad thing to then do on an immersion named project. But I think that's definitely something that we've learned out of, that people shouldn't be able to see the edge at any time. They should feel like they can go anywhere. And maybe they can't actually go everywhere, but they should feel that they can.
Yeah, it's a so that's probably the main focus when we develop new immersions is always how can we hide the fact that this is a game better than we did in the last iteration. We've seen it when we started adding entities. You will see in coming immersions that more work has been done, that we're trying to add more life to the cities. But it's always, there are always limitations in that none of what we add are there for sort of gameplay in the old school sense of the word. The purpose is not to have like an adventure map or anything. So there is always going to be some distance between the player and everything that goes on in the city. It's not a role play or The Sims. You can't interact with your neighbor. But we are working actively to try and mimic the flows of the city more than we have in the past.
You guys have smashed all the questions so far, so
Awesome.
For now, there's not much left in terms of questions, of course.
I think we can run through more of the project that we've done. I think we've mentioned most of them.
Would it be? I'm gonna go all code for you here. Is it? Would it be inappropriate to hint at the new immersion type that Mervin is running?
Oh, feel free to.
So I spent a few minutes talking about a different path that we're also taking the immersion series, a sort of sub-series that we call, what do we call them? Mega immersions?
I don't think we've actually decided on a name for them yet.
There is a working title along those lines where we're working on representing singular, very significant buildings at a much higher scale. So of course we won't get the sense of immersion that we normally do in just representing the size, but we will, to a much larger degree of detail, be able to describe these buildings. So that it would be, now it's not, we're working on one, but I won't mention that one. But for instance, it could be like something like the Taj Mahal, where you are actually able to get a lot of pictures of the interior and you do it in much higher detail. We're working on a new sort of immersion where we go into some of those buildings and express them much more detailed than we do with the interiors of something like Chicago. Whether or not that's even a feasible path, we won't know until we've done the first one and seen the reactions to that. But I think that's an interesting way to go as well, and try and give more deeply insight and maybe be able to explain visually explain the architectural style of any given area in much more detail by enlarging the build that much.
Mm-hmm.
Probably all I have to say about that yet, but
we're still pretty early on, so
yeah, it has just been started after many debates on how to best do that. We've begun working on that, and we're always looking at different ways to take the immersion, because it's probably, as some of the questions into that, and as we talked about before, some of the projects can be a bit samey from the point of the one building them. So finding new ways to make the same kind of project is interesting to us as well, just to keep it entertaining to produce. At the end of the day, regardless of how popular a series might be, we don't want anyone to burn out working on those.
Mm-hmm. I think next month we'll already see some changes that we're doing to the immersion genre, because next month is when our next immersion map launches, or should be. I think it is. I did see a question appear. How do you change your approach on recreating a city when making it for the marketplace? August, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think I would approach it from the opposite angle, actually. That so when we make it for the marketplace, we're much more focused on just representing the city. I think that the main issue, so sometimes we change and we might cut off area that we originally wanted to do, because when it's for the marketplace, we have to think in the economics of it all. That's sort of the boring side, but we have to balance how well will the city be. We always want to make as much of the city as possible, but at the end of the day, we also have to be able to pay our builders. Where when we do something like Melbourne, there are two main differences. One is that we in advance will know how much we can do. So there's we don't have to go back and forth and try and pick an area. Usually the client will have said it's this area we want to represent. The other thing is one of sort of pseudo propaganda, I guess, where the client typically want to tell a specific narrative. We present the city as is, but they will put the focus on specific things, and they will, as Bram described earlier, they'll say that those specific buildings have to be detailed, they have to be of a very high quality, and that's typically because that's where the client wants the focus to be. So we have much more freedom in that sense in marketplace builds, where we sort of have to cater to those wishes, but also don't have to balance out the financial part when it's an edge project. In a marketplace build, we decide what's the interesting aspects and what we want to show.
Exactly. Was that all the questions?
I do have another one.
Oh.
So let me just check. I get a few and they sort of get lost in the conversations. So it's worded a little weird, but it's helpful to do build sessions with a lot of people working together. Do you think that some sort of sessions help your builders get to know each other, and is it better for them in the long run getting to know each other and working together for so long?
I think it's definitely better for our builders to get to know each other over a project, if it's a long-running project. Yeah, it's very important to us that all our builders can work together very well. I think that only improves the projects and the atmosphere in the team. If people are all on the same page and are able to work and communicate very well with each other.
Yeah, I think anyone having been a build team can recognize that the sense of community is quite important. I don't think it's specifically, I think it's the case for recreations, but it's the case for any build where you have to work together. And it's always been a very high focus in CFScape that we do our best to make an environment where that's possible, because no one wants to be be part of a build where they don't get to do any parts of the build as they feel like it should be done. Like, you don't want to be in a group where it's just one person calling all the shots and you have to just place the blocks they tell you to place. So it's quite important that we get everyone used to each other and each other's ways of working, because that brings you to a place where you can all contribute and you can all work towards a greater whole, rather than actually kind of working against each other in terms of style and such.
Yeah, for now, I haven't received any more questions, so you guys can continue as you like.
How do you like to continue, Bram?
I think we've pretty much covered our bases to what we do. So I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I think we've said everything that we could say. Of course, if there's more questions, then we'll happily answer them.
Yeah.
But right now, I think we've said all things that we can think of to say.
Yeah, all I have left is like shameless plug kind of things where.
Oh yeah, we can do that.
If you you can always do that. So of course there's the opportunity now. If you otherwise have questions about our recreations or even suggestions of places we should do or anything like that, we do have, as of quite recently, a public Discord, and you're very welcome to come on there and ask us, and we'll do our best to answer at any point, not just this hour.
Yeah. The link for that is shapescape.co/discord. They'll get you in there.
You guys have got 15 more minutes, but if you want to wrap it up, you're more than welcome to. If you think that there's nothing else you can say.
I think we'll wrap it up here.
I think so too. But we appreciate all of your time. I hope you feel like you got some insight into making city recreations.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Also, sorry, Casey, for having you wake up.
No worries. It fixes my sleep schedule anyway.
Right. Awesome.
Good.
Thanks you guys
Good.
for showing up, and we'll hear. Well,
Yeah.
you'll hear more from us soon, I think.
Definitely.
If you got a link to you guys' public Discord, you can slam it in event broadcast if you like.
Oh, we'll do that.
You
Right.
do that, bro. Good. See you all around in the Minecraftiverse, or whatever we'll call it. At the next at the what is called Minecraft Festival, where you'll
right.
of course all come.
Right,
and
right.
say
In
hi.
Florida next year. Yeah. Right. See you guys.
Good. See ya.